Real is a life's calling. Real is a lifeline, our lifeline in education and prosperity for all students, their families, and our community. So that's what real is. There's a bunch of things, but I do believe it's the lifeline, it's the oxygen, and it is a life's commitment and a life's work to prosperity and wealth for all.
Thank you for tuning into the Real Storytellers. This space was created to allow you to meet some real ones, those engaging in racial and social justice work, and to allow you to cultivate your own journey. These members are real, their stories are real, and their work is anchored in everything the Real movement represents. Welcome to the Real Storytellers. I'm your host, Angel Booz. Today we have a special guest with us, Jacynth Johnson. Jacynth, welcome.
Thank you so much, Angel. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Jacynth, let's start with asking you to introduce who you are. So tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so thank you. So as Angel said, my name is Jacynth Johnson, and I'm a New York native, born to Caribbean parents. And I'm currently a language arts and social studies supervisor for 5 through 8. And I'm an educator, been an educator for 9 years, started out as a middle school English teacher, transitioned to high school, transitioned to literacy coaching for teachers. Mm-hmm. And now I am currently a supervisor and NJEA consultant in the Professional Development and Instructional Division. And I'm a PhD student. I'm in my last year and I'm currently working on my dissertation. Right. So that's a little bit about me. I am the youngest of 3 girls, and I'm a passionate educator, and I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. And we're glad to have you. I think you are the first person I'm interviewing who is on the administrative side. So this is going to be a very unique opportunity for people to hear a different perspective in regards to this work. Nice. So that's awesome. Now, we're going to start with storytelling because that's what the Storytellers is all about. Mm-hmm. So can you share a story about a time when you knew you wanted to become a professional educator?
That's a good question. So as I mentioned, I am born to Caribbean parents. So my mother's Jamaican and my dad's from Barbados. And my mom was a teacher in the West Indies in Jamaica. And so when she came to the U.S., she was undocumented, so she couldn't continue her education in New Jersey. It was in the 70s. But I think she raised us with this educator's lens. So when we're cleaning, there was always a lesson, a reflection. So I think the way she raised us was the inspiration behind how she taught us. She was a Sunday school teacher, so she was always teaching, always I was always like a student of life in my mom's presence, just through conversation. And so I've always known that I wanted to be an educator, a teacher, but I thought I wanted to work with little kids. But it was until it was in my high school career, my AP English teacher, Miss Thomas, the way she just kind of tackled the classic novels and made it interesting and fun. And she was my inspiration to pursue 7 through 12 English. And so it was my mom, how she raised us, but then also my high school English teacher who inspired me to focus on English as an educator.
That's amazing, because most times you don't hear people of color specifically talk about being so interested in literature. Mm-hmm. So to have you be inspired in that way by a literature educator is very unique in itself, because we know that many of Black and brown people are not necessarily targeted in that area. Yeah. There are other areas that they say we're more prone to go into. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting for you to share that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And to be honest, I wasn't a passionate or an avid reader. I think middle school, it transitioned for me, but her passion. And I think when I hear a lot of my students speak, my former students, they typically don't talk about the content or the units that you taught them, but they remembered how I made them feel in my presence and in my classroom. And so I think it was her presence, how she navigated the classroom, how she saw value in me. and how she just brought that out through literature, through critical lens. And so it was her who inspired me to pursue English, because I thought that I hope to recreate that in my classroom with my students. And I grew to love literature because she loved it and she was able to transfer that on to us. And so, that's my journey. I didn't start out knowing that I wanted to do literacy, but it grew because of her passion.
That's amazing. And I was going to actually kind of follow up and ask you about that, if it was the actual topic and the subject, or if it was the teacher that actually got you inspired. So you clarifying that is amazing for the audience, because sometimes the teacher, their influence and inspiration can be everything in terms of steering someone into the career choice, or the not even career choice, but even just the area of study, maybe in high school or college, that they may want to pursue.
Yes, yeah.
Without even knowing that it was something they were interested in.
Very true.
Now, in your work as an educator, can you share a story about the moment you became aware that racial equity is critical to our work?
Well, I think there's so many moments, right? But one moment that stands out to me was in 2018-2019 school year. I can't remember when the docuseries When They See Us came out, Netflix. I think it was that school year, because I was a high school English teacher teaching freshman lit. And when I saw the docuseries and I saw the 4 young Black boys at the time, some were, middle school, some were middle school students to high school students. And when I saw that docuseries, I think it made it very clear and plain. Not to say that I never understood the importance of racial literacy and equity before in my career, because I taught in an urban district. So they're very clear some disparities and some gaps in education and the struggle of our students. But I think it made it really clear that my job as an educator is to prepare my students to be able to navigate and tackle the real world in defending themselves through conversation, even with authorities and officials. And the oldest, the 16-year-old who was sent to adult prison. I forgot his name, but how they interrogated him. And because he dealt with some special needs, they were able to manipulate a lot of the young boys in a way, because they were educated, they were knowledgeable. And so I felt a passion, because I was teaching high school, for sure, they're closer to the real world, because I saw what could happen, especially to our brown and Black boys, when there is a lack of literacy, a lack of awareness of racial equity, and them being able to really navigate circumstances through conversation. That lit a fire and then made it more clear to me the importance of racial equity. So that's one moment that's very vivid and will always stick with me, because when I moved into my classroom after watching that docuseries, I looked at my boys differently. I looked at my girls differently. And I made it my job, especially when I was coaching teachers, when I was teaching my students through English, I made sure I chose particular resources and text that spoke to characters and how they navigate the real world, so that they can grapple with the harder questions. And so they won't be tripped up when they move through different spaces and time, because they know how to handle themselves through conversation, because they have literacy and they understand race, but they understand also inequities when they see it or when they feel it.
Absolutely. Just hearing you talk about that docuseries got me emotional all over again, because I have a 15-year-old son, and I can't imagine him going through what those children went through. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that we need to explore as educators and also advocates in this work is pushing to the forefront also the incorporation of understanding law. Yes. And I think that we need to really start incorporating that into the educational system, maybe beginning as early as 7th grade, and extending those courses throughout high school, because the fact of the matter is those boys went through that because they also did not understand their rights. Right. They didn't understand the law and what they had the right to say, to not say, that would protect them ultimately in the long run. And so having them on tape and then coercing them into doing and saying certain things, and then being able to edit that footage to tell the story they wanted to be told, was the reason why those boys suffered in the way that they did. So it's extremely important, the lessons that we learned in that docuseries. And then I think us in doing this work, being able to pull out some of the key things that we learned there that we know we need to take back into the real world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's true.
All right. So Jacynth, yes, I'm getting it right. Okay. Can you describe your relationship with the real movement?
The real movement. So the real movement is one that's very close and dear to my heart. It's interesting because it was June of last year. So with consultant to NJEA, Gabriel and I, we would cross paths and be in similar spaces with the work that we're doing through the NJEA. But he was just like laid heavily on my heart to reach out to him because I was also starting a work for racial equity in my community, my former district, and the acronym is AWARE. And so it is to awaken communities with awareness by building diverse and inclusive relationships, with educating them about social issues and their impact on neighborhood and schools. And I don't know why I thought to reach out to Gabe. I just don't know why. I think it was his energy when I saw him speak, but I reached out to him as well as another one of my close friends at NJEA. And I started to share with him with excitement. I sent this long text to him and I was like, whoa, did I just divulge too much about this movement and this organization? And he has no awareness about it. But he gave me a call back and he says, yo fam, you know how he says, he's like, that's crazy. There's synergy because there's something that I'm working on. And that was the real movement before it became this powerhouse that it is now. And so just in conversation, how he spoke into the AWARE organization when we were planning to go into schools and create awareness about racial equity in light of the George Floyd killing that happened, and we marching in the summer, and the two towns coming together of North Plainfield and Plainfield. And so Gabe was really instrumental in kind of guiding me along, doing a march that I've never planned a march before, but creating a team. And so that synergy and his willingness to pour into my vision, it was interesting, and it was really inspirational that I can now lend and work and really support the vision of the real movement. And he says it's not his vision, we're all a team. But I remember that one conversation, and that was in the very infant stages of the organization that I was planning and creating, and the real movement that we know today to be it has grown and has a life of its own. And so the real movement is extremely near to my heart. It's work that I'm passionate about as an educator, and it's really vital. So that's my passion, my heart, and my thoughts around the real movement.
Isn't it amazing how the universe just kind of aligns us? Sometimes, we don't even realize that things happen because they were just meant to be. It was written, and so your aligning with Gabe at that time was so that he could lend what he was able to give to AWARE. And then you were also able, through your experience with AWARE, to lend some things to what I'm sure helped to also pilot the real. Yeah. And so you guys were meant to have that conversation, and it happened at the right time.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Now, have you had one or more experiences with real that has challenged you or helped you to grow in some way?
What has not challenged me to grow? I feel like I'm growing at a expedited rate with the real movement. I would say from the beginning of me presenting. So just to be quite honest, I think I had a little of imposter syndrome when Gabe asked me to join the team for the real movement, because I'm an English teacher, right? I didn't see myself to be knowledgeable about history, especially African-American history. And I think there's a misconception. People think, well, because you're African-American, African-American history, you can kind of go in autopilot and talk about it. But the reality is that the history that I was taught in middle school and high school It's not the history that I'm learning today. And with the help of the real movement, it's been challenging me to detox and unlearn. And so I would say a moment or an event that really challenged me was presenting the community cultural wealth at the Equity Alliance, as well as another session that we did. It was the real learning labs. I think it was Education is Political, organizing at the Uprising. And so it challenged me to really have to study and really unlearn to learn, teaching Black lives in school. And so it kind of set me on this journey to educate myself, read, listen to podcasts, remain in a space of real movementers, visionaries and educators and activists. And so there were times where I was really intimidated and I wouldn't speak much. A lot of things went over my head, but that kind of propelled me to, it kind of piqued my curiosity, like, what don't I know about my history, And so that has challenged me. And now I'm really passionate about this work. And my dissertation topic is speaking about equity, racism, and gender equity in the US through the lens of public education. And so I've been challenged all the way through. And I've become more aware that I do have something to share. I do know when I connect with people, like-minded people and like-hearted people, it unlocks like this information that I didn't think I had within me. And so it's challenging from the very beginning all the way through. But, courage is not the absence of fear, but it's actually moving through your fears. And so, yeah, it's a good challenge, though. It's a good challenge.
Absolutely. I love how you stated that these conversations have unlocked something in you that you didn't realize was even there. Yeah. And I've experienced that as well with the reel. So it's very interesting to hear you say that, because sometimes we do have this deep knowledge within us because of our experiences that we just haven't tapped into expressing. But the reel has provided a space where some of those deep thoughts and internalized things are able to then come out in response to whatever the conversation is. And often in the real setting as well, there are topics of conversation that are brought up that aren't daily, day-to-day things that we would even think to have a conversation about. Yeah. And so it absolutely challenges us, but in the best way, and also allows a space for us to learn. And as educators, we know that we should always be looking to learn something new.
Yeah. So for example, the community cultural wealth framework, I was assigned to do navigational capital. I was like, what? Navigational? And then reading upon it and studying it and really applying to my life, looking at my parents, how they are now citizens, but they came from Jamaica and Barbados, and they've navigated systems. And I still have cousins, aunts, and uncles who are going through the process to gain their citizenship, or they've come to the US and don't know how to navigate the educational systems, but I can lend itself to help them to navigate. My parents are like navigational wealthy. They have tons of capital. And so once I was studying that framework, I shifted my mindset, not just for my students, my teachers that I supervise, but also me, to say, wait a minute, like when I walk into a space, I carry wealth, I carry capital. Are you kidding me? So my shoulders are like a little higher, and there's a smile on my face to know that every space I walk into or every conversation I have, I'm contributing wealth to that conversation. And it just kind of changed the dynamic of how I see situations, how I counter spaces. And I dare not say that I don't belong in any space anymore, because I'm bringing wealth with me. And that's going to empower, but also make someone else rich in a different way that maybe might shift a mindset or perspective. And so that's just an example. Like, you're wealthy, Angel. I just want you to know that you carry capital, and we all do. And I think that shifts how we educate when we see our students as wealthy, our families as wealthy, our communities as wealthy, poverty or not, impoverished or not, urban or suburban education, we all have wealth. And I think that brings us closer to the work of equity when we see it from that lens.
Absolutely. Our wealth is in our experiences. It really is. And you really don't understand how your experiences can really impact and change the life of another. And so we should never underestimate what we bring to a space. And so it also brings me to something you said earlier about imposter syndrome, because I've gone through that myself in several different spaces. But the truth is that people see something in us sometimes we don't even see in ourselves. And it just has to be nurtured. And we just have to be given the opportunity to grow. And when given that space and that opportunity, we really are able to do amazing things and tap into things within ourselves we didn't even know were there.
And that's very true. Absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
Absolutely. So in thinking of the future, what does that look like? How does the real movement influence that future?
So what does my future look like? To be honest, it's extremely bright. I'm excited about my future. I think it's just now I'm like in the middle. I think I'm in we're always evolving, always changing, always growing. There's always a process, but I'm loving the journey that I'm on. I think I am just really tapping into the power that I bring, my passions. And I think I felt like I've done so much in education and so much in my different space, whether it's my faith community or my social entrepreneurship work in education. But I'm seeing like all those worlds combining and coming together to really inform the work that I do, the passions that I have, the things that I say, where I pour my energy. And so I'm excited about my future. I don't know exactly. I can't nail down what exactly it is, but I'm able to narrow down my passions, and I am moving forward to support that. And I know now where not to pour my energy into because it's not really feeding or growing this purpose that I have within me. And the real movement influenced that future because it empowered me in some ways. I think, and you speak to me being an admin, but as an educator, I always thought like the wealth that I bring to the space is only good for my students in my classroom. Like I can teach them, I can empower them, I can love on them, I can help them to dream and see. But in the very beginning of my career, I wondered, will adults listen to me? Adult teachers listen to me? Do I have something to offer them? And that is like a huge myth. And I certainly want to debunk that for any educator that's listening. You have something to share, and your daily experiences 5 days out of the week throughout the school year has really equipped you to share something that's impactful for another educator or a family member or community. And so the real movement influences my future by continuing to challenge me, help me to be in spaces where people have different opinions, and being able to really appreciate those perspectives, not shut them down, but kind of welcome them in. I think in the past, if you had a different perspective, you were hushed, or you kind of were silenced or not really celebrated. But I'm celebrating diversity, not only in race, religion, gender orientation, but even in thought and perspective. And that helps me to grow, and that sharpens me. And so that's what the real movement is continuing to do and influence me to be around like-minded and like-hearted people, and challenge me as I pursue and move closer to what I feel like I'm created on this earth to do. And that's to empower and to educate.
Absolutely. And I like the term like-hearted, because we all have different things that we bring to the real, different experiences, different points of views. And sometimes we may not always agree, but we know that for the most part, people show up to the real space because they really do want to be better. Yeah. They really do want to learn, and they want to listen to be able to understand other people and what they're going through, and take all of what they experience in the real back to their classrooms, back to their families, and just apply it in their life. So we know that their purpose in coming is because we all are like-hearted. Yeah. And so I love that term, because I didn't think of that, but I love that you said it that way.
I borrowed it from a podcast. It's not my own, but you probably borrowed it from another podcast too, or a speaker. But yes,
I did it. I heard it from you, but I love that you shared it. So thank you for bringing that to the space.
You're welcome.
Now, if you had to create a hashtag for your work, what would your hashtag be?
For my work with the real movement, I think it would be real power and real courage. I think just, for me, real is showing up as my authentic self, good and bad, indifferent, right? And so I think it takes power, and I think it also takes courage to move through your fears, the fears of judgment, the fears of not knowing everything, not being the smartest person in the room, the fears of making mistakes, just fears that we create in our mind, and they become bigger than the reality. But I think with me continuing to show up as my authentic self, I think it takes a level of power, meaning bravery, will, strength, and courage. So real power and real courage.
Now, in 1 minute or less, can you tell me why the real movement is vital right now?
Why it's vital right now? Lives are depending on it. I think if we don't come to a place of understanding, first awareness of our own, and I do think that's what real brings to the space, is just a deeper reflection of our own stuff, right? And Gabe just shared that everyone has implicit bias, so no one is exempt from the equation. So once we become aware of our stuff, then we can become aware of how we show up in spaces, in conversations and triggers. And so I think it's vital because in order for our relationships to thrive, whether it's professional, familial, romantic relationships, friendships, any relationship, period, because we're built to relate and engage with other human beings, I think we're going to struggle if we don't become aware and really see how we show up in the space. So real is it's relationship building. Relationships are dependent upon it. And real is like oxygen, I do believe, for communities and families and schools, so that they can breathe, so they can see, they can engage differently. See themselves differently, see their world differently. And I think the real movement also brings hope. So I think it's vital in a world where we are now that sometimes I think hope seems to have left, right? Like hope is canceled, but I think it restores the hope. I think it brings hope to those who are in despair. I think it brings courage to those who feel that they don't have power or that they are powerless. I think it brings voice to the voiceless. And so I think that's why real is vital right now. And I think it will always be vital and always important and urgent to the work that we do, just as human beings existing in space with other human beings.
Absolutely. And the word relationship has come up in the real storyteller space before. And we know that relationships are essential to everything. You know, without relationship, you really can't connect. And so you have to take time to really get to know one another, to really understand one another, to truly be able to then reach one another. And real space allows that. With the breakout rooms, just the way everything is set up, we're really given the space to hear and learn about one another so that we can build relationships to be safe enough to share our truths. And change comes from sharing truths, because all of our truths may not necessarily be what people want to hear, but we need to hear them in order to be able to break them down and then be able to address whatever it is that comes from that truth.
That
needs to maybe change.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think just you speaking of truths, I think the real movement moves us closer to hearing the truth, but accepting and acknowledging the truth about who we are, our history, and what our future can be if we just really dive into the truth. Because I do believe where truth exists, it might be challenging at times, but there's also freedom. Like there's this weird dichotomy of life where there's so many paradoxes where, you know, you can rejoice, but there can also be feelings of sadness. Where there's victory, there's sometimes also defeat. You know, where there's truth, sometimes it might feel like it might have a hold, or it's not a good feeling because the truth has been shared in a space. But then we in that moment have a decision. Do we grab hold to the truth and allow it to set us free in some ways, set us free from bad habits, from oppressive systems, from inequities? And so I think, moving closer to the truths, no matter how heavy or weighty the truth can be, I think it sets us free.
I absolutely agree with you 100%. I really do. Now, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
Let's see. If you haven't been a part of the real movement, attended one session, what are you doing? You're missing out. It's amazing stuff. Like-minded and like-hearted educators who are passionate about the work and who sees the value in just coming together and just joy and justice. That's the phrase that is just kind of hung high and just kind of shouted on the rooftops or the mountaintops, if you will. Is there's joy in justice, there's joy in equity, there's joy in relationship, there's joy in learning. And come along this journey. We're not perfect. No one is. And that's okay, because I think there's even beauty in imperfections. And I think that helps us to move to that space and kind of own our wealth, own our capital, and engage others and live life to the fullest. So come on into the real movement. I'm excited. I love everyone. And I'm really humbled to be a part of this movement. It's changed me. It has sharpened me. It has empowered me, and it's inspired me to say and know that there's more beyond the four walls of the building of education. We educate in every space we show up in, every conversation we hold, everything that we do. We're modeling education. We're drawing out some information in someone else. And so you're an educator, professionally or not. And so just embrace that. And I think we'll be all better for it.
All right. Well, Jacynth, thank you for blessing us with your presence, your knowledge, your experience. We appreciate you and the work that you do. And you wrapped it up best. I think you gave a great summary in terms of why people should learn more about the Real. So the last thing that I would share is to learn more about the Real movement, visit our website, real.njea.org. And until next time, peace.
Peace.